I'm back. I'm here with Marc Grant. He is an environmental engineer, 350 Mass Global Grassroots Climate Movement. How you doing?
Hey, Joe. Good. How are you?
Good.
Hey, Jessica.
Hello.
So tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, 350 Mass is one of the state groups that came out of 350.org, so it's an international group. And the name 350 comes from the concentration of CO2 that NASA scientist James Hansen thinks would be a safe level for our civilization that's evolved over tens of thousands of years to, stay in that range. So obviously it's a climate action group. We're trying to reduce CO2 concentrations, minimize future concentrations.
Okay. How do you do that through doing like carbon offsets or something somewhere else? Or
There's a lot of things that individuals can do. As a state group, a lot of what we do is actually push our legislators in the direction of clean energy. So we're trying to minimize future fossil fuel infrastructure, trying to avoid new pipelines for things like natural gas, and trying to speed up deployment of like wind or solar energy. It's actually, aside from the climate action aspect, it's a great job growth opportunity too, because in Massachusetts, we obviously don't have any oil rigs or gas wells or anything like that. So we're just importing energy from other places that we're paying for. And we can actually be making energy here with people that are installing panels and putting in turbines. And a lot of good things are starting to happen in the state.
Yeah, I will tell you that one of my dreams when I was back in 2008 was I wanted to own my own home, specifically so that I could put solar power panels on my house, and I've done that. And my wife looked at me like I was crazy, but I really do believe that clean energy is really where we need to head as a world,
Yeah.
and I think it can be achieved, to be really honest with you.
Yeah, a lot of it is no longer technology, so maybe like 5 or 10 years ago, and if you haven't followed the technology, it's really worth coming back up to speed. Prices for wind and solar were kind of high, and those prices have just plummeted. So really now it's competitive in many places with fossil fuels.
Wow. Yeah, I've even looked in the past, but they have even wind turbines that are smaller that people probably could even put on residential properties, right. I would think.
Yeah, I've seen, my wife watches the tiny house programs all the time, so I see these little houses with solar panels and wind turbines.
I don't know if I'm a conspiracy theorist. I think a part of it is they're just trying to keep you like tied into the grid. Nobody can go off grid. And so this is kind of a cool group. What motivated you to become part of it, and how'd you get involved?
Well, I'm an environmental engineer by trade, so I kind of have an awareness of science technology issues. Was never really too concerned about climate until a couple of years ago. I started to realize, hey, there's a lot of scientists speaking out about this, NASA, NOAA, all sorts of folks. So I started to look into it a little bit and realized it really is getting to be an issue where it's not technology that's holding us back. It's really fossil fuel companies and people that are trying to preserve the status quo. So from that standpoint, I think it's important to try to push legislatures and the general population in the direction of the science and say, here's things that we can do right now. It'll actually create jobs. In our case, in Massachusetts, it won't necessarily create jobs in Texas, although they got a ton of wind energy down there too. Farmers are taking advantage of it down there too. But here's the things that we can do to prevent future climate problems. And a lot of it comes down to thinking about, when you're my age, you may not see a lot of these impacts, but when you're your age, you probably will see a lot of things happening over the next couple of decades.
Yeah, well, I look at a guy like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was governor of California, and he was Republican, and I know that there's a president that doesn't truly believe that we have climate change going on, but he lived in a state where you had unbelievable amounts of smog and just lived in pollution, right? And until you've lived kind of that level of pollution, I think it's hard to really understand really what's going on with a lot of automotive and things that we've made huge improvements on. Don't get me wrong, but I think every little bit helps along the way if you can do it.
Yeah, and California is a leader, I think, with a lot of clean energy, and I think Massachusetts can be too. We're certainly positioned. I think we have a progressive, population that's willing to do some of these things. I'm not convinced that the governor is entirely on board with some of these things, but I think legislators for the most part are. So that's what our group is doing locally. We're trying to, talk to our legislators and say, hey, here's the things that are important to us, and here's opportunities for you guys to, move in the right direction.
Yeah, I see some of these, maybe it's like Greenland or Iceland or one of those, type of countries where they have, I think it's hydrogen powered like buses and stuff, which run completely clean energy.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me how that just does not migrate over here into the United States. I don't know if it's capitalism putting a complete halt to it, or if it's just regulation is just too much. I'm just not sure what stops those kind of innovative ideas, because I see it working really well in another country, and then
Right.
it's not even a factor here. So
Yeah, I think there's so many differences between states and policies in terms of what they encourage. So some states like Texas have really promoted, clean energy. They have a huge amount of wind energy coming out. Oklahoma too, and other states just haven't been that interested in it. So it's interesting that some of the redder states actually make some of the most renewable energy right now, anyway, until Massachusetts gets into offshore wind or something like that.
well, they also have a lot more land.
They do.
That really helps a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
you're trying to squeeze in.
And out there, you're basically telling a farmer, hey, I can put this turbine in the middle of your field. You just have to move your tractor around it a little bit, and here's your lease payments of, thousands of dollars per year. And they're saying, yeah, sign me up. Put up a dozen of them. So.
Well, I'll give you examples. So Warren Shaw, who owns a farm in Drake, he is looking to put solar power, but because half of his land is on one side of the road and the other half is on the other, and so he wants to power this farm stand, but he wants to put the solar power on the other side.
Yeah.
National Grid will not allow him to run conduit underneath the road. They have, all rights to roads, and once you have to cut under the road, you cannot. You have to actually hook into the grid in order to power it, right? So it makes it totally not economical for him to do that, right?
Yeah.
So, it's rules and regulations like that you can't bypass, that just make
Right.
make your head spin sometimes. And those are the
Yep.
kind of the regulations that I hope legislators and lawmakers look at and say, okay, how can we help out small businesses that are trying to use clean energy to try to better power their businesses and can make it economical, and it would save them some money where they could then,
Right.
put it into other resources. So.
Yep. And I think, sometimes, especially in my field, it's easy to kind of villainize National Grid or utility. They're basically a monopoly that has a guaranteed profit. But really, a lot of it is just the incentives that they were set up with. So they've been incentivized to always, grow new fossil fuel infrastructure, put in more pipelines. They're not really incentivized to put in renewable energy. And that can all be switched around. I mean, there's ways to do that. So I don't think these people are, inherently trying to damage, our planet. I think it's just the way that the society's been set up, and some of these laws can be changed.
I'm glad that that's how you put it, and I agree with you. I do think it comes down to how they're incentivized, but some of it, and it's not even necessarily National Grid, but it's the legislation that allows National Grid to
Right.
have these rights that basically block small businesses.
Yeah.
And when I elect leaders, I don't really care as much about whether they have an R or D or whatever next to their name, more about whether they can actually break through kind of the everyday bureaucracy and actually affect change that will actually help you on the ground level, right?
Yep.
So, and if you do care about the environment, sometimes it's little simple issues like that I think could be
Right.
solved, and unfortunately they go unsolved. But
Simple, except you have a lot of lobbyists on one side with a lot of money.
You really do. What do you think the average person can do, though? If you're just watching the show and you want to just make a small difference,
Yeah.
there are things that you've thought of that would be a good starting point?
There's a bunch of carbon footprint calculators on the web. So if you Google around and find one that you think is easy for you to use, you can figure out what it is that you personally are doing that's creating a lot of carbon emissions. For most of us, it's going to be transportation. Electricity use is starting to get a little bit greener just because the amount of renewable energy is going up every year that's in our state mix. So heating will be another one. There's ways around that. It's not necessarily easy, but at least get you thinking about, okay, well, here's differences that I can make personally. As a group, we feel, though, that you really need to go beyond what the individual can do and kind of join a group. It doesn't have to be 350 Mass, could be Sierra Club, Mothers Out Front, there's Clean Water Actions, a lot of groups doing the same thing that we do. And basically, that gives you the power of speaking with a larger voice to your legislators, and also gives you more ideas and energy, behind doing things. So you don't feel like you're quite, just by yourself, kind of trying to make a difference. You're a bunch of folks that have a common voice. Yeah,
absolutely. And I know, we have come a long way, and I deal with a lot of builders, so they're always working with the HERS rating, and they make homes a lot more energy efficient now than they ever have. But we're also New England, so we have so many houses that really are just they're like Swiss cheese. So call Mass Save, have them come out and do
absolutely
an energy audit. That would probably be a good step for homeowners.
Chelmsford's housing stock, built in the 60s and 70s, is prime candidates for getting energy efficiency audits, and those are no cost through Mass Save. And a lot of the instant savings measures they have are no cost too.
I just love it when I go into a homeowner's home and they show me like another 10 inches of insulation that they've packed into their attic, and they're it's like they're all proud of it. So, well, we appreciate you coming on the show and give us an update on.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.